The terminal is like the most intimate conversation you're going to have with your computer. Really, when we're writing software, we're just telling other programs what to do. It's just a whole bunch of APIs talking to each other. And I really think Node, with the help of C++, is able to supercharge what you can do with JavaScript. You might not be able to do everything you can do in Bash, but you can get pretty far.
Big thanks to our partners Linode, Fastly, and LaunchDarkly. We love Linode. They keep it fast and simple. Check them out at linode.com/changelog. Our bandwidth is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com and get your feature flags powered by LaunchDarkly. Get a demo at launchdarkly.com. What's up, JS Party people? Have you ever wondered if you could be offering a faster, less buggy experience for your customers? Well, with Raygun Error and Performance Monitoring, you have all the information you need at your fingertips to quickly find and fix errors and performance issues across your tech stack down to the line of code. This saves you time, this saves you money, and this saves your sanity. Head to raygun.com to join thousands of customer-centric software teams who use Raygun every single day. Again, raygun.com to give them a try with a free 14-day trial.
This is JS Party, your weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. Thank you to everyone who took our front-end feud survey. We have plenty of responses now, so it's officially happening live on September 2nd at 1 p.m. US Eastern. It's going to be a blast, so join live if you can make it. Once again, September 2nd on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/changelog. Okay, we have a great conversation for you today. Hey, it's party time, y'all.
Hello, party people. We're so excited to be hosting Ahmed Owais today as our special guest. We're here to talk about all things Node automation. I think we'll be covering automation broadly. So for those of you who are listening to a JavaScript podcast who don't like JavaScript, I'm sure there's lots of transferable knowledge that we'll be sharing today. But maybe we'll convert you otherwise. But so welcome, Ahmed.
Hey. Nice to be here.
And on the panel today, we have Amelia.
Hey.
Jared.
Hi, Amel. I'm excited to automate all the things, or at least learn how to automate more things than I'm currently automating.
I have a feeling we're going to blow some minds today. So I have like the most fun stories to share about automation. Like I'm such a nerd about this. So like I can't wait to get into that. But before we dive in, Ahmed Owais, if you could tell us a little bit about your background. You have a really interesting story. You're really involved with the open source community. You're involved with the developer community at large as like an instructor and a thought leader and someone who really contributes a lot of great content, educational content. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for, saying all that. I don't know what I can say beyond that. You said I'm Ahmed Owais, and a fun bit about me is right now, I am the head of developer relations at this company called Rapid API. I have been a teacher. I call this a genetic bug in me because I come from a family of teachers. Both grandparents and my parents are teachers. So I tried running away from it, for a couple of years, and then I thought okay, I have to teach no matter, what profession I am in and whatnot. So beyond that, I've spent major part of my career writing open source software. I have over 200 plus GitHub repositories, all open source, free and open source software. And as you all know, I'm a big fan of automation, saving time, being productive, and, spending more time on automation than I'm supposed to. I have contributed to the core software of WordPress, Webpack, React, a teeny tiny contribution to NASA's Ingenuity Mars helicopter mission. That was really a big deal to me, and happy to be here.
Oh, that's amazing. We're so happy to have you. So would you consider yourself like a polyglot? Is JavaScript your favorite, or are you kind of language agnostic?
So the fun story there is, before me, there were 13 electrical engineers in my family. So every engineer was an electrical engineer from the same university. So when I asked, what should I do? They were electrical engineering is the mother field of everything, right? Even computer science. And they knew that I was interested in computer science. I was writing, Python script shells back then before college. And then I ended up becoming an electrical engineer for the lack of guidance or whatever you want to say. So I tried out like 26 different languages. And now I call myself a web purist. I love the web platform. Nothing anyone can do to make me change my opinion on that. And I used to be, one of the few people who used to manage like a couple of lines of JavaScript in the WordPress core back when JavaScript was not cool at all, And now JavaScript is this big thing and Node.js is this big thing, right? So definitely JavaScript in the web platform. As I said, being a web purist is what I do. I love the web platform, the openness of it, the APIs and everything.
Amen, brother. Preach on.
You're in good company, yeah.
Yeah. Amelia, did you catch that shade where he was like, I became an electrical engineer for lack of better guidance?
I did.
So I've been automating things for many years, but I haven't used Node very much to do so. I think we're going to focus on automation, but also like Node-based automation. Ahmed, are you doing everything in Node nowadays? Do you automate in Bash, or do you use other things, or is it all Node-based?
For the life of me, I was afraid of terminal. And I was like, I don't know who these people are. And funny thing is, like, I come from the world where I used to write firmware software, right? It doesn't get more meta than that, right? You're writing machine code by hand, counting those zeros and ones and everything. And I would just corrupt a couple of zeros and ones to just toggle the switch to off because it's just corrupted, right? And that's how I started out. Like, okay, if I corrupt this Symbian phone's menu button, it's sort of a fake security patch, so no one can press the menu button and go to the menu and see your videos and photos or whatnot. So like stuff like that. I used to see people who would write really weird looking bash scripts and do really fun stuff. So I kind of forced myself into learning Bash early on because I wanted to, kind of like, I didn't even know back then that I would be, pretty much excited about automating anything. I kind of foresaw that if I could automate just 3 things, like for example, I'm in this mindset that I want to work on this project. If it could just open up the browser and the code editor plus the terminal, that would be it for me. Even if I'm watching Netflix or whatnot, if it just opens up at a particular time, I would start writing code, right? So I would be more productive. And that is how it started Bash, as we all said. And then I started, I think there's Matthias Mind. I don't know, I'm pronouncing his name right. He's engineer at V8, Google. And he has his dot files open sourced. And then I learned about, dot files, right? And everything about Bash in dot files got me away from Windows to Linux to Ubuntu and, to Mac OS, where dot files are a thing, right? And I think I spent like a couple of years writing only Bash. And when I really got excited about it, I kind of found out that the community that is around Bash automation is not that interactive. Like you put an NPM package on NPM, a Node package on NPM, and you can expect like thousands of downloads by the end of the week, right? You put a Bash package where and how, what is the package management there? What is the release cycle? How do you version it? Like, it's a bunch of tangled mess, right? And that is what I'd never really liked about Bash, right? So when I started writing about automation scripts in Node.js and being a web purist, I love the web platform. I know the JavaScript syntax. I have always hate might be the wrong word or too strong, but I could never remember, how to write an if else check in Bash, how many square brackets it has to have and what is that -nz thing, right? So JavaScript is more natural to me as a web developer, right? But right now, I have been able to write so much automation software around my work that is in JavaScript that allows me to not context switch a lot. But there are definitely things that you cannot do with Node.js.
I love your point about how important the ecosystem around a language is. I keep trying to learn Bash, but like it never sticks because like you never get feedback and like there's no one place to go look to see what's available or like what the right way to do things is. So I thought that was a great point.
Yeah, I think like it came as a realization, right? It was not, okay, Node.js has a better ecosystem. So how you go to a particular cafe or a particular restaurant and they tell you their Wi-Fi password and you have it stored, you just don't remember what that is. And now you're with friends and the waiter is not coming and they're asking you like, how are you able to connect to their Wi-Fi? What is the password, right? So you always have to, dig through a bunch of files to see like what was the password, right? So I wrote a bash script Wi-Fi password that would just, tell me what the password for the Wi-Fi that I'm connected with using the OS keychain, macOS keychain. And while CLI, the automation there was really fun, everyone would have odd questions around how do I install this bash script? Where should I put it? On desktop or in some user resources, system resources folder or whatnot. But I did the same thing with Node.js, and now everyone knows, okay, I'm just going to npm install it, right? Or even better, npx run it, right? So it was a realization there, like if I create more automation software in a language that people like me understand better, it would just be adopted more. There would be more people that will get excited about it. There will be more people contributing to it. It's just, the community part of it is much, much bigger now. Like Bash has a big history that Node.js does not have, but Bash is still stuck there where, a bunch of things are just not, no standards there, right? And that is, I think, what is actually hurting Bash, not its syntax or not, it's the way we distribute it, the way we interact with it. Is there a welcome header? It has to be ASCII. How are people generating that ASCII code? I've seen beginners ask such questions related to Bash, right?
I think Bash is great for when you're just starting something. So if you have 7 command line commands that you run all the time, you pull those 7 out, you slap them into a Bash script, verbatim, pretty much, make it executable, and run it. And now you have the start of something great. Maybe you're done. Maybe it's never going to leave your laptop, and it's just going to work that way. But I think that's a very good point you're making. When it comes time to actually get serious about this automation and distribute it and have collaboration on it, you just need better tooling. And Bash is as old as time itself. So it existed and it began in the time where we just would just highlight, just copy and paste somebody else's Bash script into our own Bash script. And that's how you distribute your code. Like here, you either download this file and throw it in your path, or literally just copy the parts you want and type them out or what have you. But I often start with Bash, and as soon as it gets complicated, like maybe I'll do a little bit of looping and that's about it. But once it gets beyond, like these are shell commands that are run in order, and maybe I'm looping over some files and doing that again. Beyond that, I'm reaching for a quote-unquote real programming language. Now, I know a lot of Bash enthusiasts who go beyond that. Maybe they have a couple 100-line Bash scripts, but those are few and far between.
Yeah, it has its, charm. Like, for example, when you start piping things in Bash, and you have to use some sort of UI, like it may not even be UI. It may be just templating, like, for example, I want to rename a couple of files and I want to rename it. For example, I'm scrapping a couple of YouTube videos from a YouTube playlist and I want the name to look at a particular way. I want to use a couple of things, the time and whatnot. Doing the same thing with JavaScript is just so easy. And with Bash, it's like you have to have a cut command pipe to that and then a grep. Like it's more harder than regex for me. And that is where I used to completely lose hope. Only when I kind of got this realization, maybe I should try Node.js for doing this. And I think about a year ago, I did this Twitter poll, and I also did it on Reddit. What do you really use Node.js for? And I was able to pinpoint that people actually write a lot of scripts with Node.js. They just, whenever someone talks about automation, it's more, Golang, Python, or Bash or whatnot. But there were more words for, creating automation scripts with Node.js than creating APIs. Whereas, you would think that, Node.js is for APIs, right? But everyone is writing NPM scripts nowadays. It is sort of, a small Node.js script. If you want to go beyond that packages and file, you end up with something .js, because who likes to create a bash file to run there unless until they're trying to do it on a server. And the server is also Node.js nowadays, right? So it comes from there, I think.
Yeah, y'all have been, I've been trying to stick up for Bash here, y'all have been bashing it down.
You just wanted to use that pun.
No, actually, you're everyone's analysis is so on point. I think Bash is this little curmudgeon in the corner that nobody likes talking to. And I think like always your point about community is there's no community around Bash really. There's maybe a small, I would say like a hobbyist community or people that are like maybe super hyper into automation that are, really Bash aficionados. But the majority of engineers I know are like, they have their set of Bash tricks and they copy pasta them again and again because they don't even take the time to like really internalize like what is actually going on here. But for me, it's like Bash does so much heavy lifting and it's just, Node.js is an abstraction that uses C++, right? C++ is kind of painful to write and maintain. And, we just keep building these building blocks and NPM packages are also abstractions. And I just feel like, the terminal is like the most intimate conversation you're going to have with your computer. And really, when we're writing software, we're just telling other programs what to do. And it's just a whole bunch of APIs talking to each other. And, I really think Node, with the help of C++, is able to kind of like supercharge what you can do with JavaScript. And you might not be able to do everything you can do in Bash, but you can get pretty far,
Yeah, like I'm not saying Bash should not exist.
Of course.
I once had this epiphany that all of my dot files should now be small CLIs in Node.js. So ungratefully, I started with this mkd function I have in Bash, which also creates your directory and CDs into it, right, in one go. And turns out you cannot really do that with Node.js. So like I've written hundreds of CLIs. And I was stuck at this basic thing where, it's a child process and it does not understand what was created because it was sort of created in the OS and not in Node.js. And like there are no APIs there. And I spent like 2 good days on creating a one-liner that Bash had in Node.js and I just gave up. And then, I was talking to a really, I think JavaScript and React has corrupted us. So I have a bunch of files in a folder. And I am trying to list them and do things with them. In Bash, I can do that, right? But I want to await that thing, right? And I have no idea how I can do that with Bash, right? I want to make sort of a UI, a loader, so I know like it's happening in the real time. It's not, a fake loading bar or whatnot. And there's a really good project called ZX by Google. It's a tool that is actually a Node.js-based Bash scripting language where you could just await something like this, await ls. So it's a bunch of Bash inside your JavaScript, inside Node.js, and it just works, right? So I think that tool actually came out of this frustration that people want to write JavaScript, right? But they want to use some parts of Bash just as is, So like, I think there's fun exchange between these two languages.
Yeah, but like, don't you think that like, some of these problems are because like these concepts don't actually exist in the lower level languages, like the concept of await and promises, they don't exist in C and they don't exist in these low level languages. And so, and funny backstory, actually, really coincidentally, I was having a conversation about this exact topic with Alex Russell yesterday. And he was explaining to me why like they tried implementing promises with TC39 in like 2010 and they just gave up because they kept trying to explain to these like low level implementers, like, what are promises? Why is this important to web developers, right? TC39 a long time ago didn't really have a good representation of web developers, right? It was mostly actually like language designers and implementers, the folks who actually work on the engines in browsers. And so, like there was just no empathy, right? There's like, what is this promise thing? What are these web developers doing? Why do I need to why do I need to deal with timing issues? And why do I need to introduce handling for asynchronicity? It's really interesting. Like there's just concepts don't always translate one-to-one across, languages and ecosystems as well. And so there's a little bit of like this uncanny valley where you need to kind of like make Bash do an await. Like how do you do that, right? Like I can't do it. And like, you pay me $1 million. I don't think I could do it today. So, how did you solve that problem? Always tell us.
Yeah, it's this library from Google that I talked about, ZX. Before that, I think it's really new. It has like I think 20,000 star cases on GitHub or something. But before that, it was a bunch of different packages hacked together, which had some of them had WebAssembly, some of them had lower level Node.js, C++ code that would allow you to in a very very hacky way do this kind of stuff. Like I had this huge course on lynda.com. I was trying to learn photography. I promise you, I've still not watched that thing. And it was like a 10-hour long course. And somehow, my ISP in Lynda was not, working out really well. So I figured they are not allowing me to download this. Maybe I could write a script to download it. But then downloading it would be really bad because I didn't have that much space. It was like a terabyte or something. It was really big because it has raw files that instructor wanted us to look at or whatnot. So I hacked together a bunch of CLIs where I was able to download it through a CLI called YouTube DL. And then I uploaded it to Dropbox through a server on DigitalOcean. And from there, I was able to, kind of stream it on a peer-to-peer network, right? So my electrical engineering knowledge came to a little bit of help there. But the fact that I was able to do that was impressive. Like I completely left, I had just bought a new DSLR for the first time. And this is like 6 or 7 years ago. And then I put that camera aside and I just got more and more excited about this whole new world of automation. Like if I can do this, what can I do? And then I started really liking data. Like where I come from, our stock exchange actually still publishes numbers using PDFs. They don't have an API that a public level API that anyone could use. So I had to scrap those numbers from PDFs to create a sort of a real-time database plus API, and that was so much fun, right? So I know it's a bunch of things that were hacked together and patched together. The developer experience was just not there back then. And that is what I think Node.js is for me. If I have to do the same thing again, I just do it with Node.js, right? It just makes sense. People are even crazier. They are trying to write CLIs with React. And for me, it's too much, right? But people are doing that.
Yeah, I'm going to refrain. I have no comment on that. Yeah, no, that's just kind of like, everybody seeing, like React as the nail and they have the hammer or whatever, trying to fit it into places that it doesn't necessarily belong. But I once learned about a project, like a real life project that used React's render lifecycle to control events in a drone. So they were using React's lifecycle hooks, and they were using React in a non-rendering capacity to run a drone. So I'll see if I can find that project and link it in the show. But where there's a will, there's a way,
I'm surprised there's enough space on the drone hardware for the entire React runtime. That's amazing.
Agreed. I'm just amazed that an engineering manager approved this project. But that's besides the point. I think the point is maybe that all these things are just, everything's software. Everything has an interface, and it's just bits talking to bits. And Node.js kind of gives you that, it just gives you an entire ecosystem of reusable, composable utils that you can just use to supercharge and solve all your problems. So that's kind of what I'm walking away from this conversation with.
Yeah, for me, I think on one end, I don't like UIs anymore. I love to design. I wanted to be a designer. I couldn't ever sketch, right? And then I found out okay, engineering is, paying my, for the food on the table and everything. But on one end, I create CLIs in the terminal, right? Which has no UI or whatnot. And the other end for UI for me is components, right? It does not have to be even Google Sheets or, presentation or whatnot. It doesn't even have to be Markdown. I love my React components a lot, right? So for example, my resume has gone through so many iterations over the last 15 years. It started with a Word document. Then I used to have InDesign for my resume and whatnot, and now it's based on Next.js because it's so easy. There are numbers in there which are live. So whenever someone asks for my resume, I just, send a render, and those numbers I know are, live. They are my followers. They are being pulled through the API and whatnot. So I just don't know of a better construct for UI than components. It's sort of minimal in that way to me, right?
Yeah, I was waiting for like the data viz expert to chime in here because like,
I was also deferring to Amelia on that one.
it's just she's thinking.
I was thinking I'm just a little slow today. I was thinking how interesting it is that you were interested in design and then you switched to, I think what you were saying is being more interested in like component design and like the design of programs, which I think that's a really interesting parallel between like, you don't have to be like pushing pixels on a web page to be a designer, but like if we're creating scripts, then we're also designing things for humans.
Yeah, like Bash has a user experience. It's painty, but it's there, you know?
Might need a few more designers.
Right. But no, I mean, like, I actually think not all CLIs are created equal. And there's a lot you can do when designing a tool that doesn't use a graphical user interface, right? No GUI. Like, yeah, there's a lot that you can do to make things easy or painful. Like, right? Like think, Vim or think Vim versus your favorite CLI tool. It's a much more delightful experience in the terminal when you have a sense of predictability, you have a way to get in, get out, you know what's coming, you have helpful messaging, right? So there's definitely an art there, I think. And, not all CLI tools are created equal.
A recent trend that I've been looking at is a mixture of both. Like, for example, whenever I want to send an API request, I love my terminal. I can send a curl request. It's just when it's bigger than a GET request, it's a POST request. It has a bunch of, data. I hate writing those, slash this, slash that, slash, right? So like, I'm completely forgetting what the name of that company is, but it's a CLI. I think it's called, I'm completely forgetting.
Are you talking about Fig?
Yeah, it's Fig. Yeah. So it's like, inside your terminal, for the silly parts where there's a lot of repetition, it opens up a UI. That part of UI is really good. You can fill the data, the parameters there, and then it turns back to the CLI part, right? So like it's like Zapier with code, right? So
totally.
If that makes sense.
No, totally. So we're going to get into all the kind of nitty-gritties of this ecosystem. So we'll be right back, kids.
This episode is brought to you by Sentry. Build better software faster. Diagnose, fix, and optimize the performance of your code. Over 1 million developers and 68,000 organizations already use Sentry, including us. Sentry also recently shipped a new SDK for Next.js applications. Check the show notes for links to more details. Best of all, our listeners get the team plan for free for 3 months. Head to Sentry.io and use the code TheChangelog when you sign up. Again, Sentry.io and use the code TheChangelog.
All right, so Ahmad, I'm curious. We were just talking about how to design good user experiences. I'm curious, like, how do you go about creating scripts in Node, and how do you kind of build in that user experience that's easier to use for developers?
Yeah, so I think there are two parts to this question. One is like, how do I end up, thinking about, okay, this should be a CLR, right? So that is sort of a life choice I've made. Like, whenever I wake up, I open up my terminal and I write dashboard, right? And it prints out everything I care about for that day. It has my to-do list. It has the number of sales of my courses, the meetings I'm going to go to, a bunch of things all inside of terminal. And these things keep changing. I scrap a lot of data. So I use Flatten Data Project now from GitHub as well, right? So what I do is, like, for example, I also don't watch news. It's been a long-term commitment. I think I'm in the 10th or 9th year of it. So like, for example, a fun story here is COVID was happening. I was the last person to realize that it was happening. I actually just quit my job to travel to like 40 different countries throughout 2020 in COVID. And I spent 6 months planning that. So I was the last person to find out, like, okay, this is something that is beyond, it's global, right? And then there was just so much weird news out there. I just couldn't pinpoint, what was the right way to, what is the right thing. Even if I went to WHO's website, it was very hard to figure out where is the COVID data, where are the stats that would give me information the way I want it, right? Like, I don't think there's a news channel that would let you customize news the way you want it, right? So that is where, there's a good startup idea, by the way. There's where, I created the CLI and I just put it out there. And that CLI is, I think, served about 2.89, I think, billion API requests. I'm just grabbing a bunch of, COVID data and I just put it on GitHub, right? And that is exactly what I do. Like, even for a really small thing as a CLI user experience on, how to tell people, press space or press enter. In the Bash community, I'm not trying to bash them again, but there are just so many assumptions that a $sign, that $sign kept me away from terminal for so long. Whenever I would run a script, it would just, cannot recognize the $sign command, right? So like, I try to create so many packages that could be just, a couple of lines of code to make sure people would know that there's a CLI welcome package that so many CLIs are using that I created. All it does is it just prints out, the header of a CLI. There is a CLI help package, and then there's a particular way people write so many spaces on different spaces to generate help. And they are really good packages. Synthrosaurus has a lot of work on this, like his Meow framework. Where it falls behind is when you have to write things that would contribute to user experience and the design of your CLI. So I matched a couple of different projects to create a tabular interface. So you would just have to create a JSON file, a JavaScript object, if you may, to tell people, that CLI, what is your flag JavaScript object? In that object, you can define, if you type, let's say minimal or M, it would just create a less designed, it would just print out the less designed version of the CLI right now, right? But to be able to do that in the Bash community, I don't know how they do it. They like manually enter and calculate the amount of space, or they run a loop on something like that. But in JavaScript, we have really good tools that could map things out like this. So throughout my journey of open sourcing and creating CLI projects, I've relied on creating a lot and lots of small, tiny projects that I just pull in together to create CLIs. So once I'm done, it takes me literally less than 5 minutes when I start writing a CLI project to create a small CLI and to be able to publish it on GitHub, on NPM with really good documentation and API reference of all the objects. Less than 5 minutes or for a small CLI, right? And that only happens because I have so many different packages, so many automations running for me, and I feel like really good when I'm able to do that.
What's your philosophy behind like writing scripts for yourself and writing scripts and then publishing them on NPM for everyone to use?
So I used to be like, I should start writing open source code, and I started like I think 15 or so years ago with WordPress. I've contributed to a bunch of different software, React, Next.js, Webpack. Actually helped React get relicensed as an MIT library, right? But things like that happen really rarely in your life. You cannot really wait. Like there's a child theme concept in WordPress, and everyone knows it's just one functions.php file and a style.css file where you just write one thing that my parent theme is this theme, right? I created a small package for that, and that was a huge success somehow. And that, it was like, I think 8 or 9 years ago. Then I kind of, realized that I can never decide what or which of my open source work is going to go viral and is going to be something that people are going to be crazy about, right? Or something that I would feel good about, then it has a big impact. So what I decided was, if I could automate away a bunch of different things that are, just wasteful, like for example, you see how many automation scripts you find on GitHub gists? I think that happens because people I don't want to write a README. I don't want to publish it on NPM. Maybe I'm on a machine where my things are not set up, but this is a really cool script that I just want to put out there, right? But the problem with there is it's not really useful, People cannot pull that in through their, the community part is just, you just broke JavaScript's community part. That is what it was good for, right? So I automated all of these functions. So I don't have to worry about, okay, now I have to have a changelog file and now I have to publish, notes on GitHub releases. I automated all of that. So all I could focus on was solving a small or big problem. In that way, anything that I see when writing code in whatever project that, okay, this could be useful, right? It takes me literally, really, really small amount. It's like copy, paste here, run a command. Like in my Node CLI course, I created a CLI that creates CLIs, right? So I actually got so excited about it. I ended up recording a huge amount of, videos on it that where it's so intuitive that you only have to run one command. It will know all your defaults, all your what should be, in your change log. Then I invented a small emoji log commit spec for messages, which relies on just like 5 to 7 emojis, nothing more than that, which is very good for generating change logs and generating release notes. So a bunch of these things get automated by just writing good commit messages, right? So like once I was able to do that, I was able to improve my output from churning out, let's say, a couple of open source software per year to 30, 40 open source repositories, even if they are really small, even if they are not, that useful. Like, for example, there's this month where all of our Muslims fast. It's called Ramadan. And we have Seher and Aftar times. So I have a CLI for that. Right? And a bunch of people use it, right? A bunch of people, like it's a struggle every time you wake up like 3 a.m. in the morning and everyone's, what is the, Seher time today? And like, I only have to, open up my terminal.
I love how I identify as a Muslim as well. And I love how your answer to like, it's 3 a.m. and I don't know if I can eat yet is like, like I'm going to just open up my laptop, run some commands in my shell. I love how that's your answer versus like, click on this, like refresh this website that I may or may not have open. You've gone to the other side, my friend, in a good way. And I just want to kind of like step back a few because you dropped a lot of good knowledge there. So first of all, thank you for the COVID CLI. I think that was like that was the one project where I feel like, wow, maybe JavaScript is actually useful. Just kidding. It just made me really proud of NPM and the community and the ecosystem that we've built that, has really solved a lot of pain points around code distribution very, very well. You know what I mean? So like, that's amazing about our ecosystem. And we're very lucky, for that. I mean, folks are coming into JavaScript without kind of scars from prior lives. Like, you don't know how good you have it, folks. Like, we have a really nice ecosystem for code distribution. But that being said, what you're kind of talking about here is like, you're like really humbly talking about good software design and good software architecture. Like, and we're using automation as a use case. Like, I feel like you're talking about principles of modularity. You're talking about kind of, really building out the pipelines so that you can actually focus on the problem that you're trying to solve. And I feel like one thing that really gets in the way for a lot of people when they're trying to like get started with like, automation work or writing scripts is it's the pipeline piece. Because so often everybody knows what business logic or what method they need to write to like do the thing that they need to do. It's all of the other pieces around like, how do I connect with my OS? How do I get it out? How do I get it in? How do users interact with it? Like, that's the stuff that really trips people up, And it really feels like we're at a tipping point now where, automation is really critical. Like, I think it's a critical skill for developers to be able to really like, I hate to use the word 10x, but like to 10x yourself, right? Like, and I'm using this in a way that's really very much around like the marathon that you have with yourself, not with others, right? If you want to free yourself up to not work on the same problems again, right? Like look for ways to kind of reuse tooling and code and being able to kind of build these pipelines for yourself. But maybe we're at a point now where we don't even need people to learn how to make CLIs for CLIs because there's an open source tool. Go use that and then go focus on the code that you need to solve, need to write to solve your problem, Like, we'll take care of the plumbing, right? It's the beauty of open source.
I think you kind of picked up on one thing I was trying to mention. Like, for example, you would, listen to or watch to this motivational speaker or something, they're saying like, You just have to pick yourself up and go to where you are, where you run. Nothing more. If you feel like running, you can, go on. But your task is to, get yourself in a car and, drive to where you go to run, right? Rest your body and your brain would just make things work for that. And for me, like, for example, like, as I told you earlier, I was studying electrical engineering. I started double majoring in CS. I had less time. So even to date, right, I have this alias called O. And if on my work computer, I go to my terminal and I type O and press enter, it would just open up everything I need the way I left it there for that particular project. So for example, there's a project for TypeScript, so it's TO, or it's something, for recording, it's RO, recording open. So it would open up everything. So it gets me to that point where, okay, now I have to open up ScreenFlow, and now I have to open up Adobe Audition, and now I have to, set up all these like 3 different screens I have the way. And it's like, when you sit down to study and you're just sharpening your pencils and you're like, okay, I'm done for the day, right? So for me, getting productive is, I want to spend the most amount of time on the actual thing. And that is what I'm mostly excited about, not writing documentation. I know documentation is useful, right? But the fun begins when I'm trying to solve a problem and when I have solved a problem. And then it's all about, okay, now I have to write TypeScript types and whatnot, right? To make it really look really good. So I want to be able to, get there as soon as possible. That is how, I'm wired that way, I think.
So let's say I wanted to take your CLI superpowers and inject them into my body to also become super powerful like you. Where do I start? Because I see like there's a create node CLI repo. Is that the one? Or like, where do people go to say, he's done all the work, I can create CLIs that are super awesome, super easy, just like he does. Where do we go?
There are a bunch of places you can go. First thing I would say is, if you want something completely free, so like, for example, I've been creating these CLIs for a while now, right? And people have been asking me to teach this. So I started a course called Node.js.com. It's a paid course. And I recorded 30 hours of content. I deleted 2/3 of it. It's 10 hours of content now, 20 projects, 100 videos. So if you want to, just, I'll handpick you. I'll teach you what is Node, how people are teaching Node.js event loop in the wrong way, and, stuff like that. I'll give you, how to create templates, how to create. It's more than, just creating CLI. It's more about, how can you automate your life as a software developer, right? And the fun part is, all of the exercises, all of the code that I create in that course is open source. So you can go to my github.com/amados and you can, find it there. It's pinned right there. Even if you don't want to go through that, even if you just want to create good CLIs, I created a project, which was 2 hours of videos called Create Node CLI, right? It's just like Create React app for Node.js and CLIs, right? It was a fun project. Like it can remember things locally, like what was the author name you put in last, it can remember that kind of stuff. It's really intuitive that way. It can generate all the files you need. It can set things up, wire things up in a way, that you start right there with, okay, this is the bunch of code I picked up from Stack Overflow or I figured it out. It has everything figured out, the documentation and everything else. So you just write that or paste that code and now you have a CLI, right? So create Node CLI for something you want right away. My Node CLI projects on GitHub, which are completely open source. Even the documentation is open source. And if you want paid videos, nodecli.com.
I saw a tweet today that was basically, it said something about, I don't understand why people pay for courses. I'd rather you just offer me a service and I'll pay for that. Like, don't make me pay to learn something, which, first of all, I totally disagree with. And second of all, I think it's funny that you're both offering a course to teach people and you also have like the automated script to do the services for them. I'm also curious, like, which do you see more interest in? Like, are more people using the like automated script to make a Node CLI, or are more people interested in taking the course?
Wait, is this a trick question, Amelia? Because I just was curious if you were like trying to bait at the engineers constantly reinventing the wheel like problem. You know what I mean? So wait, do they use your awesome tool that's been vetted and, or is everybody trying to like
build their own
fork and, one up your, just joking. Just kidding.
I think people learn in different ways. And like, I think part of me open sourced it because I come from open source and I've learned so much from open source. Like every problem I have, I just go to, GitHub and Sindhu Soros, make a directory, right? So like if he has a package, I can just trust that package, right? So like I kind of owed that to open source, but I'm also selfish here. I really want people to build CLIs because I know I don't have all the time in the world, but they are going to build some things that I'm going to use. So there are a bunch of CLIs that my students have created that I am using. So they paid me for my course and created something that is actually helping me. So like it's either being selfish or whatnot. I just wanted people to know that this is how I do it. And you should definitely do it, even if you don't use what I teach here.
Yeah. So I went through my own like journey with automation and, overcoming my fear of bash and the term, like I would say going beyond surface level terminal commands, which most people are familiar with doing day-to-day work. And I have to say, just from my own experience, like it's a journey and not everybody's path is the same. You're not solving the same problems as other people. And so you kind of, I really love this distinction of like pipeline versus like source code, right? So if you can kind of really maybe just draw the line there, write the code that does the thing that you want it to do, and then tackle the problem of how does it connect to everything else and how do you get things in and out of it as a secondary step. Because I think sometimes when you start doing things like that are so brand new and, like it can be daunting. It's hard to get steam and momentum, so you can kind of build on your successes like incrementally in that way. But it really is a journey, and it's really, and it's a journey that never ends. I mean, the operating systems and like languages, libraries, tools, new problems arise, new APIs are come out, old problems creep up. I mean, security issues pop up. I mean, it's very much a living, breathing ecosystem, even though a lot of us think of the terminal as very static. Did y'all know there's new versions of Git, there's features being added to Git, like Linux is a living, breathing project. Like there's just so much. So, it's a journey, but it's like foundational knowledge that really is like the missing manual for many web developers who started out, kind of doing higher level, software design. So
I should probably just mention this. Like I used to think that creating automation is so hard. And what clicked for me was when Chris Coyer showed that you can actually write CD space and this just drag and drop that folder and it will just translate to that path and just press enter, right? That was so easy. Like it was 2 years ago when I learned that, okay, USR is not user, it's user system resources, right? And everyone says, go to this user library. It's like not everyone has the deep in-depth knowledge of how, Linux was based on Unix and, how these resource folders were created or whatnot. So for me, what was stopping me to jumping into this command line world was, how do I even CD to this folder? I know it's on desktop and this is its name, but like, I don't know where it is desktop, right? Like when I was young and just somebody showing me, okay, you could just drag and drop and CD it to it. And I'm like, okay. And there's a fair amount of gotcha here. Like it starts with that thing and then it's a big rabbit hole. You really start to enjoy it and you spend more time writing automation software than actual software. But it's so much interesting.
Yeah. Like also really, I think Awais, I called you by your last name, Ahmed, to your point, it's a journey, but also a lot of software engineering is kind of fighting your distraction factor. Like you have to not be distracted by what you don't know. You don't have to know all of the methods in the jQuery API to use a few methods in jQuery or even create great apps in using jQuery, right? And so, the really beautiful thing about like the shoulders of giant, like we're standing on the shoulders of giants because they design these great APIs that are very modular and can be used as individual segments, right? And so first you're learning how to use CD, then you're learning how to use Makedir, then you're learning how to use Touch, then you're learning how to, like do pipes and greps, right? These are all composable elements that, you're going to kind of put in your like knowledge tool chain, So with that said, before we close this segment out, Ahmed, I'm going to ask you a question. You have like one inspiring thing to say to someone who's like, who's like, you know what, CLI, no way, terminal, yuck. I don't even use command line for Git. I use a GUI, like terminal scary. Like, what's an inspiring thing to say to that person to get them over the hump?
Yeah, I don't know what that could be. For me, it was like, I wanted to be a designer, and now I love the terminal, the idea of automation. But like, I haven't given up on the design sense. I love writing CSS from scratch. I've contributed to Bootstrap, but I've never really used Bootstrap. So like, I am weird that way. Like, I love the design part of things, but it doesn't always have to be UI versus or GUI versus terminal. So if I'm Git bisecting something, I would definitely recommend doing that. It's so easy in a GUI. You just drag a branch here and drop it, and it will just take care of everything. But everything else, I don't want to write like a bunch of things. Like, I think sometimes once you start writing automation, it's the same thing. You have like 10 images and you want to rename them, or 100 images, you want to rename them a particular way. Then you feel like, I don't know why I became a software engineer, right? If I can't even write something that would just, I can see it. I can mentally imagine it, right? At least in JavaScript, you can. If you just know what are, the basic integrations, how to test the file system and, how to read these files and rename them. Everything else is just, really, really easy, right? So it's a superpower that you can just have, it will pay its dividends over the years.
Mel, can I take a crack at answering that one?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, please.
So if you're sitting at your laptop and somebody comes over and they look over your shoulder, maybe you're trying to impress them. Maybe it's a girl, maybe it's a boy. And you fire up your terminal and you type in a command and fire it off and things start happening. They'll think you're really cool.
They'll think you're a hacker, man.
That's right.
Dude, bro.
They'll think you're smarter than you actually are. There's your reason.
Hacking the world. Yeah, it's so funny.
Any other reason? It's fun.
No, legit. That's actually very true, because I'll be doing work on airplanes sometimes, and then like an hour later I look up, and then like the person next to me is like, "You're my superhero." I'm like, "Really?" Like, I was like struggling with some basic stuff for like 40 minutes, but I'm glad I'm glad you think so. But yeah, no. Always to your point, know your shortcuts. If anything, for your own ego, right? So you can feel superhuman and get a little closer to the metal. So with that said, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with fun stories of our automation journeys and fun examples, and our folks on Twitter who shared their favorite automation tips. So talk soon.
What's up, party people? This episode is brought to you by Micro. Micro, aka M3O, is a new cloud platform built for developers by developers. Our good friend Azam Aslam is leading this. And if you're tired of AWS and feeling overwhelmed by the cloud, infinite billing, and an endless sea of docs, it is time for a change. The Micro team is reimagining the cloud for the next generation. M3O is a new developer-friendly platform to explore, search, and use simpler APIs for everyday consumption, all in one place. Get access to the APIs you need in one click and test them right there on the web before using them. Simple, fast, and affordable. You won't get burned by bottomless billing. You top up your account and pay as you go. And right now, they're in early development and building out the first set of APIs, and they're looking for feedback from developers. Sign up and get $5 in free credits. Kick the tires, give them your input so they can build the best APIs you want to use every single day. Learn more at m3o.com. Again, m3o.com.
All right, everyone. So we're back, and this is like going to be my favorite part of the show, which is like story time, automation story time. And no, we haven't written a bunch of scripts that are using robot voices to narrate these stories. Like that's not happening.
Are you telling me I narrated these stories for no reason? Beep, boop, bummer.
These are true stories, real humans, real war stories and proud moments. So everyone, like, what's the thing that you're like really, really proud of doing using automation? Like, even if it was like renaming 1,000 files, like that's 1,000 files. Like, that's cool, you know? But like, what are some stories? Jared, you want to go first?
Sure. So back when I first got started, I actually didn't consider myself a programmer or developer. I was more of a scripter. I was studying information security in school, and I liked to just script things, but I didn't actually think of myself as a developer. When I first got out of college, I was a network administrator, so I had managed some Linux machines, mail servers, stuff like that. And there's a lot of manual tasks on a network to keep it running. This is back in the early aughts. And I had a lot of jobs I had to do every single day. And then slowly I just automated every single one of those jobs to the point where I didn't really have a job anymore. But everything was still running smoothly. So I used that opportunity to learn web development on the job while my job was doing the job for me, which was pretty cool. So I actually learned how to do web development while being a Linux network administrator because I had automated all the things. So that was pretty powerful. But my more fun one, I'll do this one real fast, is that I like to smoke cigars. And there is a website, it's a cigar auction website. And they have a particular auction style called free fall, where they have like these falling prices that reset on occasion. And so the prices start high and then they fall down to some sort of threshold. Then they go back up. And the reason they do this is because they want you to sit there and watch it and buy it when you think it's low, but you're not sure exactly, is this the lowest or could it get lower? I don't know, I'm going to buy it anyways. But as a developer, I thought, there's some sort of minimum amount that it's going to get to eventually. And it may not hit it every time through, but it's going to hit it at some point. And one of my best friends used to have a job where he would make phone calls all day. So he would sit there and stare at the screen and watch the free fall and buy cigars for us at the lowest possible price. And then he doesn't work there anymore, and I didn't want to stare at the screen all day. So I wrote a script that would basically imitate my eyes, watch for the lowest price, and let it run for hours upon hours on end until it got to the lowest price, and it would log it. Then I'd come back and I'd say, okay, here's the lowest possible price. Then I'd put it in buy mode, and it would watch it again until that lowest price came in, and it would buy the cigars for me. So I actually still use that. I just used it yesterday. Still works. And I think that's pretty cool.
Jared, I think the biggest thing I'm surprised at is like that you smoke cigars. You don't strike me as like a cigar guy, you know? This is fascinating.
What kind of a guy do I strike you as?
I don't know. Not a cigar guy. Now I have to like reevaluate my understanding of like who you are, you know? This is like...
The plot thickens.
Yeah, the plot thickens. I'm like, Jared.
I'm a multifaceted person.
Twist. Yeah. You know, I love this. Yeah, you have depth.
Thank you. You thought I was shallow, but turns out there's one facet.
I feel like a lot of people did that with the vaccine situation. Like I did. I know I did. I like built a little, a script that just like refreshed and checked like when appointments were available in my neighborhood. So I didn't really want to trek like 2 hours to get a vaccine in the pandemic. So that's what we did. But like, I think a lot, it's amazing how it feels like cheating, but...
When I went there, I was the only one.
I think anytime that the job is like refresh this web page over and over again, like that's a key moment of like, yeah, I'm going to automate this because I'm not going to sit here and just hit refresh for hours, you know?
Yeah. And actually, speaking of which, so we did a Twitter poll. So we'll be sharing a few stories from like folks, like what folks shared online. But Cypress, Cypress is a tool that, is used for automated like end-to-end testing. It's like the little robot that clicks on your web apps. But there's developers who use Cypress to like avoid having to like get back into the same state and click a bunch of buttons and manually log in every time, So it's like Cypress is running in watch mode. It gets them back to the exact same state that they need to be in, like for the code that they're writing. I mean, I thought that's like genius, right? Like I have to say, like the worst part about UI development for me is all of the iteration cycles. And so like if I can get a robot to like do that for me and while also getting test coverage, right? Like you're writing a test to like continue testing your code, getting to the state, and then you're able to just reproduce it. And that's a trick that I learned a very, very long time ago. Like when I was very, very new to software engineering, there's a senior engineer who really shaped a lot of my thinking. I got a bug for the first time and he's like, all right, cool, let's figure out how to solve this. And he was like, well, the first thing we're going to do is write a test. We're going to write a test that reproduces the bug. And then we're going to be able to keep running that test to like reproduce the bug as we fix the software. And then by the time we fix the software, that test should start passing, it'll be failing now. And so, I was like, wow, like I would never have thought of that on my own. And, I always give him credit for that. But that's another cool way to like, it like back to your refresh point, Jared, like that's a good way to, bring that into your developer workflow, as opposed to like buying cigars on the internet. Nothing wrong with that though. So Amelia, how about you?
So, Jared, your story really resonates with me. I've done a lot of like data viz client work where you're scraping data, or there's some cool stories there with like automating getting from Google Sheets or turning Google Docs into like a CMS, which is crazy, but sometimes the right tool. But I don't want to talk about any of those because there's a fresh one that I think is kind of interesting. I just did a quick exploration of like, we always look at our code bases as a series of folders and files. And I was wondering if maybe there was a different way to visualize that so you can get like kind of enhance your understanding of like where files live. You come into a new code base, you don't really know how big it is or where things live or what languages it's in. So I built this interactive tool in React for you like type in your repo name and then it can go look at your repo, it'll get clone it, and then it'll like recursively look at all the files and then visualize it for you. But I was like, no one's going to use this if it's not part of their existing workflow. So what I did was I created a Node script that you can use as a GitHub action, which I've been using more and more recently. And what it does is it actually renders that React component, because I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, which spits out SVG. So I could use the exact same React component, but call it from a Node script and then save out an SVG file, which kind of like blew my mind that like things could be this easy. So that's one of the only things in my life that's been that easy, and I love it.
Well, while we're here, we got to give you props because that repo visualization thing you did is spectacular. Imelda and Amada, did you guys see what Amelia made?
No, I feel like I saw like something on Twitter from you recently about something similar to this. Like, I didn't see a repo visualization though. Like, that's cool.
Yeah, like I saw somebody talking about it.
Yeah, I'm like super jealous that GitHub has you on their payroll. I feel like, no offense to GitHub, but I just feel like you're like next level, Amelia. So they're very lucky,
Oh, thanks.
Seriously.
Most definitely.
We'll link that up in the show notes so that the listener can check it out as well.
So the listeners can visualize.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a fun, you could say, war story of automation. It was, when I was at college. So we had been contracted by this bank to create some sort of, thing that, was on top of a PLC. It was a, hardware automation thing. And we would burn it with the same code and it would work. We would show the manager, look, it's working.
Wait, what's a PLC? Like a POS, like a point of sale device?
No, it's like PLC. I think it's a programmable logic controller, but it's huge. You know how you see small ICs nowadays? It used to be this big before, like 10 years ago.
Okay.
I think they're completely deprecated now. But the software that was running in that PLC, we just created a small, Xilinx-based module that would just sit on top of it and automate a bunch of things in a bank, right? And we spent 3 days mind-boggling about it. Like, what the heck is wrong with this thing? We would run the same code. It would, pass all kinds of tests. We would show the manager, everything would be working. And we would always go there after hours. And when the bank would open up, it would just flip the switch, Everything that should be on would become off and everything. And it would happen momentarily for some weird, moments of the day or whatnot. And I somehow, I wrote a small bash script that, helped me continuously basically DDoS that PLC to figure out, what are you thinking now? What are you thinking now? And what we found out through that was like, so there was a capacitor which would, we had placed it in a wrong way and it would get so much sunlight that it would get charged up it would retain so much charge that it would start thinking, okay, I'm in the on state right now, and it would mess up with our code. So the hardware was all right, the code was the same, but it would just change the flips. And it was like so mind-boggling that, this is one thing that I know it was very hard for any human to pick on something like that. Was when I started looking at, okay, automation is interesting. Like this was more of a nerdy example. One cool one was
that was cool. I'm sorry, I just interrupted you. Like that was not nerdy. That was really cool. Like no, seriously. Yeah, I don't have a ton of hardware experience, but like what I like, the little that I know is like working with hardware is so complicated because like there's physics. Physics is a thing, and like it's like this variable that's like like sometimes sometimes you don't. And it's like, oh, there's literally a piece of dust here, or there's like this, this bit has flipped, or it's crazy. Like,
yeah,
physics is, yeah.
Sometimes, my electrical engineering background comes into play. Not anymore, but like I used to be famous that I used to like bread with potato. And one of my friends actually brought, a lot of that. His mother has cooked that in the hostels when we were, attempting exams, which were like a month long. And we put it in the hostel's kitchen. We called it a mess. And it was locked. It had an automated lock. And around 3 a.m., we felt so hungry that we felt like, okay, we should just destroy that door. Like, it's our bread. We need to eat it, right? And the fun thing that happened there was like, since we were electrical engineers, we were able to figure out, okay, this log must have LMC55. So like there's a timer IC in there, and it must have LMC393. So it can definitely detect sound. The sound it used to detect was the sound of our prefect who used to lock the door with his voice signature. It was a company. We were able to create a fake network of Wi-Fi around that lock, and put a patch inside it so that LMC timer would, switch this everything with our code on a particular time base that was around, I think, 3:47 a.m. It took like us about an hour to figure out. And then finally, we just had to, just clap and the door opened. And it was so good because, the sound sensor picked up on our clap, and, it was equivalent to, that person saying, the prefect saying, open the door, right? So like, so it was such a cool hacking experiment for us. Like, okay, this is something, we got to, try out. We completely forgot about eating bread after that.
This is like the best heist movie
Totally.
I've ever watched.
I'm thinking this is why we need to, this is why you should teach your kids science, math, and engineering. Like, that's what I'm thinking. Like, this is just great. I love this, like, all this like experimenting while you were so young. So when did you start writing software, Ahmed?
I think I must be like 11 or 12 years old.
Yeah, that's pretty young.
Pretty young.
It's definitely pretty young. Yeah. I mean, it's not like you're an 11-year-old in 2020, like picking up Python or Ruby or JavaScript, like, like there was no NPM. There was like, was there even Ruby gems? I don't know.
Early 2000s. Ruby didn't exist.
Yeah.
So.
Jeez, no, that's incredible. Well, my automation story, I think the thing that I'm most proud of, and for me, it's definitely a journey. It's still continuing, and I always tell this to my DevOps teams, like, I don't want to be a sysadmin when I grow up, but I like want to impress one. So like that's like my goal is to be, I like really like end my career as a software engineer, having like really, I think mastered computer architecture, networking systems, all that like backdoor, back alley knowledge, like that is just, always with us as we, switch jobs and machines and, products. But for me, it was actually working with ASTs. I kind of talked about this actually in changelog a few years ago. But I worked on a really cool project with the Microsoft Edge team while I was an open web engineer at Boku. And it was basically like taking a bunch of like JavaScript files and tests for the web platform. They're actually like tests that test like CSS properties and web APIs, but the tests themselves were totally still valid, but they used a lot of like proprietary API hooks from like IE. So they're valid tests, but we need to now have these tests be open sourceable, as well as like these tests need to run on all browsers, not just like Edge IE, right? So how do we do that? Like we have thousands of test files, like lots of repeatable patterns. And that was like my really deep dive into ASTs, and, something that would have taken like weeks of manual work that would have probably been error prone. Like I, was able to like automate with Bash, Python, and like, Node ASTs, JavaScript ASTs. So like writing a bunch of custom transforms and identifiers. And of course there was like stuff that I couldn't transform. Oh, and by the way, I guess ASTs are abstract syntax trees. It's like the thing that your compiler uses to like read your code, So it's like this predictable tree that literally tells your compiler like this line has this character and this function has this method and whatever else. So it's extremely precise. It's unlike regex, it's like very reliable. Like, that's why we have linting tools and all of that jazz, right? We trust them because they're using ASTs. They're not using a bunch of regex to like, format your code. So it's not static analysis. But yeah, so we transformed like thousands of test files, did that successfully. That was like when I was like, wow, like this is powerful stuff, and I really want to invest in it. And I don't get to like invest in that skill set as much as I would like, but it's always like a goal of mine. It's like a constant thing that I'm chipping away at,
Yeah, Mel, we had a deep dive on that conversation, episode 362, machine-powered refactoring with AST. So if you want to hear Mel talk about that for over an hour, 64 minutes, I'll link that one up in the show notes.
Yep.
We go deep on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. Ultimately, we're software engineers because we're force multiplying something, right? We just rarely get to turn that inwards. We rarely get to force multiply ourselves because we have a heavy bias. Like we're like, no, I need to do it my way, and I need to write it again. I need to reinvent the wheel. And it's fine. Everybody has this thought. Everybody does that. You just got to fight the bias sometimes and try something new and uncomfortable and see where the journey takes you, So do you want to share some stuff from Twitter, Jared?
You have the info. I don't have it.
All right. Well, I'll shout out a couple. One was from someone who's similar to me. Like I'm working on a set of like good morning scripts. I don't want to have to like manually log into my VPN, do my authentication, blah, 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 blah. There's a whole like, pull, rebase. Other folks are doing that. And Peter Lyons is like hooking into like even having a bunch of default tabs open with his good morning scripts, which is kind of cool, like all the right tabs open based on like branch names or something like that, I think. So, like what Jira ticket to open. It's crazy. Like he's gone like, totally off in the deep end in the right way. And then there's other folks that are like doing all kinds of things with Android automation, trying to like automate turning off alarms, GPS locations, a lot of security stuff, which you don't really think about, which is like really smart to do. And then Jeff Posick from Google, he works on Workbox, like service worker tooling and other stuff. He's starting to write all of his build scripts in TypeScript. I don't know. Do you want to talk about that a little, Ahmed? You saw that thread, right?
Yeah, I think ESM modules are really good in everything. In TypeScript has its place. I just have, in my experience, adding a layer of ESM or TypeScript has been a performance bottleneck for me. Like, for example, if I have to, for example, when I'm done recording my course, and it takes a long time because I'm not a native English speaker, what I do is I run this CLI called CTime, course time, in the folder where there are all rendered videos, and it just goes out and kind of figures out total seconds of each video, and it figures out and then prints out, okay, your course is 8 hours and this much long, and that is like a cycle. I'm starting like, okay, finally I'm done, right? I wrote that thing with TypeScript, and then I converted it to ESM, and it was so slow for some reason. And I could not for the life of me figure out what was making it so slow. But when I transpiled it to, Node.js 12, I think, back then, it was just so fast, right? It did it in milliseconds. So from that, my gut feeling whenever, I'm doing something that has some production, consequences, like whenever some CLI or automation is in production, I try to, kind of stay away from TypeScript and ESM. But Sendressor has been pushing a lot that we should all adopt ESM. So I think ESM is going to get there sooner. I'm not so sure about TypeScript, but hopefully soon.
I'm with you on the ESM part, but the TypeScript, like I'm not a fan of like introducing transpiling unless I absolutely have to. So for server runtimes, like I'm not a fan of TypeScript. Like, please don't hate me, internet. But I've come a long way with TypeScript. Like, I'm just, yeah. We'll end it there. I'm just yeah. Dot. I'm just yeah. Full stop. Read between the lines. So Ahmed, it's been really wonderful having you. Sorry for pronouncing your name like 12 different ways. We'll have to blame Ahmed Nasri, who's like the person who I talk to a lot, who has the similar spelling name, different pronunciation. For the record, do you want to pronounce your name the right way for everybody so that like everybody can hear you say it, like your full name?
Yeah, for sure. And don't worry about it. All pronunciations, all pronunciations are good. So, so my name is Ahmed Awais. And the fun part is Awais is my actual name and Ahmed is my family name. So for some reason, my parents thought it would be fun to put my second name first. So I kind of, tell people, call me Awais, and they always feel odd about it because it's my second name. So like, it's Ahmed Awais. So
CML, you've been doing it right the whole time. Call him Awais.
Apparently, my husband's Korean, and like they do the same thing. Like every time we're in Asia, like all of a sudden everybody's calling him Kim. I'm like, who's Kim? He's like, last name first. That's the way we do it here. Get with the program. I'm like, okay. But anyways.
Yeah, like here we don't do it like that. It's just my family. So
just your family did it.
Clearly family of very special people, and we're really lucky to have you contributing to the web platform, Ahmed, as well as like teaching with such enthusiasm. And like I think we all have a lot to learn from you, so like we wish you the best of luck. We'll put all the links in the show notes, and we hope everyone is feeling a little more excited about their terminal and trying something new. Just start with the problem that bugs you and like see where it takes you. And tell us about it. Tweet at us.
Yeah, awesome to be here. Yeah. And I'll just say one thing: if you're creating some CLI, definitely tweet me at Mr. Ahmed Awais. I love using CLI, so you never know.
Yeah, you should start a hashtag.
We should.
Yeah, you should. All right, so Jared, you want to take us out?
I do. If you're a command line junkie like myself, you will enjoy episode number 451 of the Changelog on modern Unix tooling. And if you're just getting started with Node, we did an excellent Node best practices episode of JS Party last year. Check it out at jsparty.fm/139. We appreciate you listening and telling others about the show. Word of mouth is our favorite way people learn about the pod. JS Party is produced by Jared Santo, that's me, with music by Breakmaster Cylinder, that's not me. Special thanks to our partners Fastly, LaunchDarkly, and Linode. Next up on the pod, Divya is back and she joins me to learn all about Shopify's move off SaaS and on to, well, I don't want to spoil it. Stay tuned for that episode. It's coming at you next week. And now a moment from the changelog number 450. It's Gary Bernhardt talking Vim.
I absolutely would recommend it. I also would recommend people not to beat themselves up over it if they decide they don't like it. Like there's kind of this weird sort of, you have to use the hard thing or you're not a real programmer or whatever. Don't worry about any of that, but give it a try. And I can name 3 different reasons to do it. And I think all of them are sufficient on their own. So first, RSI, it'll prevent injury. It's a really important thing as a programmer if you want to make a career out of this. The second is speed. Vim is unambiguously faster than other editors. It's not even remotely controversial to say that. But the question, of course, is going to be whether you value speed over what you may be giving up, things like deep language support from something like Visual Studio or a JetBrains IDE or whatever. So you're making a trade-off there. But for me, speed is even sufficient on its own because every time you have to stop and like slowly make some edits is a chance for you to forget what you were doing, to lose the state in your brain. And maybe you're like 8 levels deep in your stack and you're going to start losing those levels if you have to get distracted. It's also just fun, honestly, to be fast. And then the third reason is that Vim, unlike most other editors, is not going to go away. The Vim keystrokes in particular, so many people have them so deep in their brains that 30 years from now, you will absolutely be able to get an editor that has those keystrokes. I don't know whether it'll be Vim. I don't know whether Bram Molinar will be maintaining it, but you will be able to use those keystrokes. So any of those for me is sufficient, especially for the last one. If you think about the timeline, just for me, right? 15 years. At the beginning of that time, TextMate was just becoming popular. Then it was Sublime Text was cool. Then Atom was cool. Then VS Code was cool. A lot of people switched between 2 of those, 3 of those, maybe all 4 of those. And that whole time, I was just getting better and better and better at Vim. And you multiply that out by the length of a career, use Vim for 40 years, you're going to be so good at it by the end, and it's still going to be totally relevant, I think.